Hello and welcome to People and Profit, where we look at how business shapes our world. I'm Stephen Carroll. Coming up, is the boom in aircraft building over? We'll look at what's driving a production slowdown at Airbus and Boeing. Did the Euro 2016 Football Championships come to the rescue of France's beleaguered tourist industry? And not for all the tea in China. We look at how coffee is gaining popularity in the world's second largest economy. First up, though, the biggest names in the aerospace industry gathered in England for the Farnborough Air Show, but conditions were more turbulent than in previous years. Plane-building giants Airbus and Boeing are slowing down production in anticipation of a fall in demand. One notable announcement from Airbus is that it's drastically reducing the number of A380s it plans to build in the coming years. Is that a sign that airlines have fallen out of love with the superjumbo? Josh Vardy has been finding out.
The A380 has had a turbulent past. Now, high costs and falling orders have prompted the manufacturer to wind down production of the superjumbo. Airbus announced at the Farnborough Air Show that by 2018 they will only build 12 A380s a year, down from the 27 it built in 2015. The reduction reflects a general slowdown in aircraft demand across the industry in general, combined with a considerable backlog of orders.
The temptation is to make hay while the sun shines, get planes out the door, bring in revenue, keep up with the ramp. But of course, there's an awful lot to be said for throttling back now, letting things level out, and not produce a self-induced downturn by overproducing.
The A380 was originally aimed at competing with Boeing's monopoly of the jumbo jet market, but years of delays and technical problems saw the project spiral wildly out of budget. When the A380 finally took to the skies, customers were slow to buy, fearing the aircraft's size meant it would be harder to fill seats. Meanwhile, Boeing's iconic 747 jumbos are also suffering from high costs and lower demand. In January, the manufacturer announced it means to slash production of the 747-8 in half. Boeing says that they're now making the model at a loss, so will strip back to building one plane every 2 months from September. Both Airbus and Boeing are now focusing efforts on producing more fuel-efficient and cheaper aircraft, a move away from the bigger is better attitude of the past.
So that's the story with the A380, but what does the industry as a whole look like? Delana D'Souza is here with the details. Delana.
Well, Stephen, the aviation industry has been flying high in recent years. As economies develop, more and more people are opting to fly rather than use other means of transport. Last year, the two biggest players in the industry had a total of nearly 1,800 orders between them, with Europe's Airbus landing on top. That growth is coming from emerging markets in Asia and Africa. Operators there are eager to get their hands on smaller single-aisle planes like the new fuel-efficient version of the A320 called the A320neo or the Boeing 737 MAX. That demand means plane makers now have to deal with an enormous backlog. Boeing is doing better than its European rival in that department. The American company is dealing with a backlog of 5,800 planes versus 6,800 for Airbus, which is why in the last year Boeing was ahead of Airbus when it came to deliveries, getting 762 planes to airline companies, while its rival just managed to churn out 635. So how do the two big players in the industry cope with the orders on hand and keep customers happy? Airbus, for its part, is scaling down production for the double-decker A380. This will allow the plane maker to focus on making models which have filled up its order book. It will begin accelerating the production on other jets, which include the popular A320 and the recent wide-body A350. That's because if it can't get the planes to airlines on time, well, they risk cancellations. Qatar Airways has already cancelled the order for its first A320neo after Airbus failed to deliver on schedule. Stephen.
Thank you very much for that. Next, here in France, it's peak holiday season and the busiest period of the year for the tourist industry. France is the world's #1 holiday destination, but visitor numbers and bookings dropped sharply following last year's terror attack in Paris. The Euro 2016 tournament has brought some relief to this important sector of the French economy, but is it enough? Catherine Clifford reports.
Heading off on their summer holidays, many families are taking advantage of special deals being offered across France's troubled tourism industry.
We're paying 150, 160 euros for 6 nights. We got it half price.
Tourism makes a substantial contribution to the French economy. In 2014, it represented over 2 million jobs across the country and generated some 7% of GDP. In terms of arrival numbers, France is the world's top destination, with over 83 million people coming 2 years ago, followed by the US, Spain, then China. Of these visitors, the most came from Germany and the UK within Europe, and from further afield, the US and China. However, since these figures were published, the industry has faced some fierce challenges. Following the January and November 2015 terror attacks in Paris, professionals across the tourist trade have complained of plummeting profits. Travel warnings have held some tourists back. The US cautioned its citizens from heading to France during the summer, warning the Euro 2016 and other events would make for greater terrorist targets. Another turn-off, the mass strikes and protests against changes to labour laws. Images of violent clashes between police and protesters spread across world media, and worries about transportation snowballed amid petrol shortages and public transport strikes. For now, at least, Euro 2016 has given the industry a much-needed injection.
There's been nothing like it since the World Cup.
This room normally costs 65 euros a night. We've put it up to 199 euros.
Spending by foreign visitors during the tournament is estimated at more than €1.25 billion.
Well, to get a better idea of what sort of state the French tourism industry is in now, we can speak to Vangelis Panayotis, who's the Chief Executive Officer of the Hospitality and Tourism Industry Consultants MKG Group. Thanks for being with us. Let's go back to November of last year. The attacks in Paris had a really dramatic effect on the tourist industry. How bad was that for the industry themselves?
Of course, what is the most important when you're traveling is security. So any events that affect the security has always a massive impact on the tourism. So definitely Paris was doing extremely well up to the attack, even though in January we had the Charlie Hebdo attack, but at that time the impact was lower because there were some events and at least was the very first attack. But due to the nature of the attack on the 30th November, then the impact was immediate and has lasted for quite a long.
So really the Euro 2016 Championships came at a very important time for the industry.
Yes, clearly everyone was very positive about the Euro. Clearly France has got a lot of benefits from this Euro, but outside Paris. All the cities that were accommodating, hosting the different games, they had a clear impact, positive impact on their revenue for tourism overall and hotel in particular. But Paris was still suffering because we had the flooding in Paris. We have all these strikes, and still there were some negative media coverage within the spectrum of tourism. So we had to combine all those negative issues, the impact coming from the terrorist attack in November. So clearly the field was not so great for positive input.
So where is the industry now coming into, of course, the peak holiday season here in France, both for domestic but also for a lot of international tourists? How does the industry look now?
The industry look much better, definitely, because also we had an effect that is particular in France. We have the Ramadan effect, as we say, because the clientele from the Middle East, usually they postpone or they arrange their holidays to France according to the Ramadan, of course. In the last 3 years, it was fully in July and August, but now it has been, I think it's finished in 6th of July. So we're just starting now to see this clientele coming to Paris. And also one thing that was very important is that the image giving during the Euro about security was extremely good.
We had a warning from the US State Department during the Euros about the security threat to France. What sort of effect does that have on bookings for hotels or flights or things like that?
Clearly from the US it has a very bad impact. The long-haul clientele is always the one who is the most impacted by security issue because they're traveling from far and they are not so comfortable with the situation locally speaking. Of course, Paris is not Afghanistan or Iraq. You can walk in Paris without any issue. But clearly to have this administrative action like the state of urgency, and also because the insurance, the traveling insurance, were not covering the travelers due to this situation, this has clearly a very, very negative impact on those markets.
And can you put is there a percentage? Are we looking at a particular proportion of drop in bookings as a result of that?
Yeah, clearly there were 30% of the international and long-haul clientele that didn't come to Paris. It's just coming back slightly, but this is clearly the clientele that is lacking in Paris. They go to other destinations. London has been a good alternative. There is other destination in Europe or elsewhere, but so far Paris were clearly lacking 30% from this international clientele.
OK, Vangelis Panayotis from MKG Group, thank you for joining us. Now, for a fix of caffeine. Tea might be synonymous with China, but coffee sales and production have been rising steadily there in recent years. It's a market that's dominated by instant coffee, but a culture of aficionados who know their flat whites from their lattes is growing too. Lauren Berstecker has the story.
It has become the gathering point for Chinese brew lovers. Tens of thousands turned up at Beijing's 4th annual cafe show to sample beans, purchase coffee machines, and watch world-class baristas in action.
The Chinese audience really love the latte artists. They love the coffee culture, and it seems growing a lot in the past years.
Tea is the traditional hot beverage of choice in China, but the coffee industry could be catching up. Over the past decade, coffee imports have grown at an annual rate of 15%, and domestic production has also increased. China's middle class recently overtook the United States as the largest in the world. And drinking coffee has, for many, become a symbol of their newly found wealth.
When there's a large number of people who want to drink coffee, it creates possibilities to open coffee shops. But those who want to start a business don't always have much knowledge of how to make coffee except for decoration and equipment. And that's why our school is providing this training.
China now produces more coffee than Kenya and Tanzania combined and consumes more than Australia. A market that's likely to grow as the Chinese increasingly turn to coffee to take the edge off their daily grind.
That's it for this People in Profit. If you have any questions about the stories that we've been covering, you can get in touch on our Facebook page, France 24 Business, or you can tweet me at NewsStephen. Until next time, thanks for watching.